Yeah, so we're live, hanging out on the Twitch channel, super casual. But yeah, we'll give it a couple minutes. I do have the report up. I just tweeted out. Let's make sure I don't have anything funny running in the background.
I'll tweet you out.
There you go. Thank you.
I'll retweet your tweet so you get the engagement.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Got a big Chris fan in chat.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Who dat?
Yeah, I mainly wanted to. I'll have you just start. You can introduce the report too after you introduce yourself, and I would love to touch on some of the things that surprised you. And then whatever questions come in chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Be happy to do that. All right. So, do you want to get started?
No, we'll give it a couple more minutes here. It takes time for the tweets to work its way around.
That's fair enough.
Put some music on in the background here. At some point, I need to start using a digital soundboard again.
Well, I can recommend some good ones for you.
I've been using Voicemeeter for a couple of years. I don't know if that's the one you use.
Yeah, Voicemeeter. I've used Voicemeeter actually since, since I'm going to date myself, since 2014.
That's a while ago.
So always a go-to. But now that I've got my new mixers, I'm going to start using those instead.
Where is this? I'm going to grab this link.
Yeah, I can. There we go.
I'm just going to copy, Control C that for the stream. Lindsay's in chat. We've verified the fiance is actually watching.
I have to control what I say now.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll keep it good.
Keep it PG. Keep it PC gaming.
Oh my gosh. She's gonna heckle us all stream. I can already tell.
Probably.
The chat wants to know: is the blonde boy single? Yes or no?
Answer is no.
No. Sorry.
No.
Verified on stream. Clip it, package it, send it. Taken. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I want to go ahead and give you the floor to introduce yourself, but I'm really excited to have you here. And I'll let you kind of do the introduction because I know you've been doing a lot for a long time. So the floor is yours.
Well, I'll just preface by saying age doesn't signify any sort of expertise at all. Hi, everybody. My name is Chris. And like Adam said, I've been in collegiate esports for a very, very long time. I got started in 2011. And you might ask yourself, there are no programs in 2011. I'd be like, yes, that's correct. There were none. In fact, there weren't even many clubs. And in 2011, there was this thing that a guy at Riot, Steve Jaworski, aka Riot Jaws, he started in the publishing team a beta program called the Riot Collegiate program. And I just so happened to be the club president of the University of Cincinnati at the time. And we applied for it and we were number 11. So that's like my claim to fame is I was the 11th collegiate coordinator in collegiate esports. Since then, I've done pretty much everything that one can do in the space. I've ran a club, I've ran programs, I've built facilities, worked on apparel, done production, white label production, collegiate production, big swanky production for things like Repop and PAX. I've worked in the peripheral side of the market, the sales side, the biz dev side, worked with influencers. I don't know, man. I kind of am a jack of all trades. I wear lots of different hats, but at the end of the day, I've always just been a really big fan of democratizing information and helping elevate other people, and not just, showing them how to fish, but where to fish and what fish tastes best and what fish gets you the most points in Animal Crossing. Because you can't just copy paste the stuff in esports. Everything's very intricate and everything's very nuanced. What works in the Midwest doesn't work in the West Coast. And so here we are today in this ecosystem, and I published a report talking about what all you guys do. Yeah. And that's a little bit about me.
Yeah. I don't think there's anyone doing more behind the scenes for collegiate esports than you. And I will go on record at saying that because there are some people in the limelight who get a lot of the credit for doing things in the collegiate space. You look at Clerky, Doc Haskell, etc. But there's no one in the background doing as much as you. And I think you're probably doing much more than most of those names are doing. But you'll never see your name on anything except on the front of this report.
And they do amazing things. And I work with some of them. But what I would say is you don't need to chase clout or chase street cred in this industry. And for a lot of different roles that a lot of people have, your name doesn't need to be known unless you fucked up. Unless you messed up. This is a Christian Twitch channel, right? We can't swear, right?
It can be whatever you want it to be.
Okay. Please don't ban me Twitch. No, anyway. But yeah, no, that's kind of been a real big credence that I was always taught, was that servant leader mentality. And like I said, if you're good, you can tell people you're good, but if you're great, other people tell you you're good.
Yeah.
That's how you know.
That's really good. So this report, you've done this is the third time this has been published? Second time. Yeah, okay. Second time. Okay, so this report, Trends in Collegiate Esports, it's a initiative by you and Esports Foundry, and it just came out. Who's the other author on this report?
Yeah, so I'll preface a little bit why we started real quick.
Yeah.
But the second author is a wonderful gentleman named Krish Narayan. He goes to UC Sacramento, and he's worked in also behind the scenes a lot of different esports orgs. One of his big claims is that he was a former T1.5, played with FlyQuest, a bunch of other people. He also used to be an admin on Practice Server, which was North America's largest pro Fortnite server. So really, really big background in that end of things, but he's a data analyst, studies IT as well as clinical psychology, does a lot of things. He's taken a lot of Harvard classes and stuff on the data application side. So I really wanted to work with him to synthesize a lot of the data that we got, because we're asking questions that a lot of people anecdotally may know the answers to, or may scratch their head and go, that seems right. But when we're publishing something and putting our foot forward and putting data behind it, you need to make sure that your quant is right. You need to make sure that the data is statistically significant and that there's a proper academic format behind it all. And I needed him to help me walk through that journey, and he's done a great job.
Got it. And how many folks were surveyed in this report? I thought it was it 90 or 99?
So for this report, we reached out to well over 350 programs via email, Discord, Twitter. Out of that, we got a little over 120-ish responses. But then you have to go back and you have to filter them out, because sometimes clubs are going to respond, or maybe it's a graduate of a program who's no longer there, and the information may not be current. Um, so we really had to filter it down to really make sure that we had an appropriate sample size that was getting exactly what we wanted to get, to we thought was representative of collegiate esports university sanctioned programs. That number is 95.
Got it. So pick one statistic that baffled you or shocked you or excited you from this report.
Oh God. So I'm going to talk about something real quick here that I think is really highlights the need for democratized data. That's a term, by the way, that Garvey taught me. Like many people, I respect the hell out of Garvey. And so I credit him where credit's due. When we look at the collegiate esports ecosystem, right? And it's 10x the size of collegiate Twitter. Everyone who's on Twitter knows at least a little bit about what they're doing. But I one of the things that I surveyed was facilities. And I surveyed not only people who had facilities, but I surveyed people who didn't yet have a facility. And I wanted to pick their brain on what they felt they wanted out of a space for gamers on campus, out of a space for their program. And one of the questions that we asked were like these opinion thermometer questions of what would you expect your first facility to do, or what would you expect your first facility to have, or most importantly, how much do you expect your facility to cost? And what I found out from that, and this is all in the report, is that the people who are not quite there yet, and I say this with love, they really have no idea. A lot of respondents were very optimistic, and they said, we want our program, our facility, our home to be future proof and to satisfy more than just the bare minimum or even the current needs of what we have, because we don't have much right now. We're still growing. We're not at that point. Others, take it even further and say, we want this facility to be accessible to not just our program students, but to the general campus body as well. Which I think is a direction that ultimately, you can argue it many different ways, but I think we'll see that directional trend in the future. But the last question was, how much do you expect this to cost? And almost half of that pool of people who responded thought that their facility would cost less than $100,000 to build. And for many program directors who have gone through the facility building process, especially if you're from a state school that uses state dollars and has sanctioned processes for construction or capital resource requesting or anything like that, or anyone who's just bought computer parts in the past year, how expensive these things can get. We see quotes from major vendors for simple PCs at being $2,500 plus, $700 for a monitor. If you're not buying a gaming chair and you're using a university, type of furnishings, those things can run, $1,100 for a chair that you feel like doesn't stand up to, what behind me is a secret lab. People just don't understand the cost, and it's not their fault. Of course, they're not going to know. Not many people are going to school for construction management or university administration, or even being a collegiate esports director. This role hasn't existed since 2016. So it's no one's fault, but the discrepancy between the expectation versus the reality sets people up for failure right off the gate, or at least it sets them up to be gimped, where they go through the approval process, they get their money, and then they realize it's not enough. But by then, the university's made that check. It's a strategic initiative. The sexy's done, and it's so much harder to, get the money the second time around than the first time.
I've heard that.
Huge learning.
I've heard that at some of the smaller state schools in my region that I've been talking to. They're like, "Hey, we're looking at building a space, or we're going to build a space," and I'm like, "How big? Like, how many PCs?" And like, 20. And I'm like, "Your school is 40,000 students. Like, I'm sorry, but I think you might be a little starting small. I don't know, but yeah, the trend is there. It seems like, But we do have a question here. Lindsay has the first question. What diversity statistic was the most interesting when you were making this report? And what statistic stunned you the most while making this report?
Well, I think we just went over the statistic that stunned me the most. Within diversity, I was actually pleasantly surprised. I think, especially with the past week of, I am Esports talking on Twitter and the conversation around diversity and inclusion in esports specifically, I think this definitely warrants a really important conversation and soul searching within everybody. But one thing that I found is that if you discount the numbers, if you discount the actual, how many women or how many minorities do you have in a program, but just the percentage of programs nationally that have some representation, I was actually really, really impressed and happy with that. And it's on page 101, Adam, if you want to pull up that stat. But the majority of programs actually seem to mesh well, or at least mesh leaning progressive on what we would consider to be a healthy campus ecosystem, a solid and healthy demographic, especially looking at female and femme identifying, LGBTQ, first generation student representation, 68%. That's huge. That alone showcases the value proposition. If everything else was bad, like that is a great statistic when you take that to administrator, because first generation students are a core demographic that any university is trying to hit and trying to grow. Even students with disabilities, knowing that mental health is just as much of a disability as a physical disability, 1 in 3 almost. So what that tells me is that gaming is diverse, and the representation in competitive programs is also increasingly diverse, which is great.
Yeah, I think this was a pleasant surprise to see. But then the next page is where you're like, okay, this is actually like it makes sense now. So like, there's the two sides of the coin. It's like, yes, we're seeing some diversity there, but then the next page, which I'm going to flip to here, is the percentage of people in the program that fit that, or at least this was female identifying at least. And it's still low. I mean,
it is.
That's the other side of the coin that we're all working against.
And at this point, I do want to be really transparent that statistics can sometimes tell part of a true story. We got to keep in mind that the percentages are higher when numbers are lower. So take, for example, a year one program that only has about 20 students. And if they report 30% female participation, that's still not a lot of women in the program, right? That you're still talking single digits here. And what we're also not discriminating against is competitive only versus these new trends for ancillary, I would call them scopes of missions, such as broadcasting or talent development or any of these other roles and programs that are becoming more common. And oftentimes we're actually seeing more female representation on like student worker roles, or again, in broadcasting roles. The competitive side is still extremely male dominated.
Yeah, that's a good point. Real Madru has a question here. With what level of confidence do you feel the sample reflects the collegiate esports population?
So we did a lot of work on the back end about specifically making sure that our data was statistically sound. And so we did make sure that we had a Z-score of 1.96 for anyone who is in statistics and following kind of the academic rigor of a academically published paper. 1.96 Z-scores and 95% confidence interval, which denotes statistical significance within your findings. And that's applying to the broad sample size as a significant as it pertains significantly to the overall population size of what we deem as the ecosystem. In this report, within 2021, we went with the conservative number of about 450 programs being that total ecosystem number.
Got it. If you're a director and you get this report, what information do you think is the most valuable to share to your higher ups as a first, second year collegiate esports director?
That's a
And what
really good
caveats
question.
might be there? Is COVID a huge caveat with all of this data, or is this a trend that we see moving past COVID?
So, interestingly enough, so I'll answer a couple of those questions. I'm going to start with COVID
Okay.
because COVID's affecting all of us. It's still affecting us. I'm a master's student as well as many other things here at the university. I'm getting my MBA and my master's of finance after that. Um, we just got an email today saying that all of the spring classes are now remote until January 24th, um, which sucks. But talking about COVID, first of all, not every program excelled during COVID. One would imagine that they would get additional resources or they would become more important because esports is one of the only competitive activities or student activities that one can do in a remote environment. But almost 15% of programs actually shrank in size during COVID, and 25% of them didn't change at all in size, which to me says that there is some type of churn because we're still recruiting students on average. So esports is COVID resistant. It's not COVID proof by any means. And we're still all trying to figure out how to deal with that on different levels of scale, whether you're a conference director or a program director. The other question was, what statistic do I think is most important to take to administration? I'm going to pick two. The first statistic is actually figure 1.1 on page 95 for you, Adam, and that's where esports lives departmentally, because where our programs live is incredibly important, and can actually, I want to make sure I'm saying this right because this is a very bold statement of me to make. Where esports lives has almost as much of a deterministic impact on the success or failure of a program as the person running the program. And I say that because different schools have different resources available. Some schools have a very underfunded student life program that runs without revenue by design. I go to a Division I university. Our student life program is like that. At the same time, some athletics programs are extremely regimented. They're siloed. They don't interact much with the campus proper, and they stick to their mission, which is competition, which can influence your future growth, or ways that you can innovate your program to stand out in other ways by limiting academic integration or other channels. Some programs may start in one department, but they might actually be more efficient in another department. Some programs may be best being independent. Some programs may be best in a department that belongs to neither student life or athletics. And it's really important for program directors to understand that, think about that, and possibly raise the question that, hey, maybe I'm not where I need to be on my campus ecosystem. That is number one. That is most important. In my mind, nothing can be more important than making sure what you do is properly located in where you need to be.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Oh yeah. And just from my experience, I mean, what I've seen is it's partly the department, but I think the more important piece of it is who's in charge of that said department. I mean, that department who's in charge of, if you're under student life, the head of student life is the greatest blocker or the greatest cheerleader for a growing esports program.
Absolutely.
And that can determine the same thing. And it might be, maybe that's the bigger case, is who's in charge of it. But you're absolutely right. And I hate when people go on Twitter, collegiate Twitter, and say, hey, esports should be under X. And they just say that's the end. But in reality, like you said, it varies by campus. It varies by the mission of the program. It varies by what resources could be available, et cetera. I really like that.
I have a lot of old friends in this space that plant their flag in the student life department very strongly. Yeah. And I'm not saying, I guess I am kind of saying that they're wrong. I'm not saying that they're wrong, though, in certain quantity of circumstances. Like, they very much could be right. Maybe a Texas school, just quite frankly, it needs to be under student life. However, we cannot copy paste in esports. We cannot copy paste in collegiate esports to say something that, as a truism, is a very, very difficult thing to say. The second question, though, you had, though, is what was the other thing that I would give, and I want to go to page 99 real quick, if you can, Adam.
Yeah.
Talking about beyond competition, this growth, because what we found in 2021, really most importantly, beyond the facility side of kind of the discrepancy of knowledge of ins and outs, people who are in versus people who are out, are these trends of programs that are innovating. I think 2021 was a very innovative year because it was our first year, still in COVID, but kind of post lockdown. And COVID gave a lot of people time to plan for innovation and how to take their programs to the next level. The other thing to highlight, though, is that, the sample size that I gave for the ecosystem is 450 schools. And already in 2022, I would say that, you could be conservative and say 450, but you could also be reasonable and say 525 now. The number of schools is growing. Just 2021 from 2020, there's a 30% growth rate. That's considered of an industry in hypergrowth. And when you go with hypergrowth, you run into homogeny. Homogeny being that everything looks like the next thing. And when you have a lot of programs that have 20 stations, they're all competitive, you're all recruiting from the same pool, you're all looking at the same high school students, how do you stand out? And the schools that don't stand out are going to fall behind. Their programs are going to suffer, and the university may chalk it off esports off as a failure. And we will see failure rates start probably by 2023, 2024, where some universities just throw in the towel or they change, right? And figure 1.5 showcases the change in 2021. Programs are changing in terms of what do they cater to, what is their mission statement, and what is their role in campus proper. And so a lot of programs are taking on general student activities. Maybe the campus doesn't have a club, so the program heads the club, or at least helps manage the club. A lot of programs are working on skills-based development. This largely pertains to broadcasting, streaming, journalism, job readiness. A lot of programs are, trying to build intelligent internship programs, or at least gearing students and funneling them towards existing internship programs in industry, such as with pro teams, such as with suppliers, for example, Intel or Dell through the Alienware, C9, Evil Geniuses, Genius League, when they had those sorts of things. Academic integration is huge. Programs offering academic resources, teaching elective classes, certificates, degrees, or even master's programs. And all of these things are growing, which means the size of these programs are growing, which means students participating in the program grows, which means the focus on how we look at these programs ultimately changes. It's not just the case of I'm recruiting 10 to 15 students a year to play League of Legends, Valorant, Overwatch, and Rocket League, and Super Smash Brothers and stuff like that. Now we have an entirely new demographic that we have to think about. And the programs that do this well are going to win. They may not win next year, or they may not win in the way that you think that winning is, aka varsity, but they're going to win long term. They're going to have something in them where, maybe Shenandoah is the Maryville of academics, or Miami is the Maryville of master's programs, or I'm, using that as an example. But everyone unanimously pretty much says, if you want to learn broadcasting, go to Boise. Yeah. You betcha they're recruiting off of that. So these are things that people need to think about. How do you differentiate? And we're seeing that now for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, since I entered this space, you could tell like everyone wanted to be the best competitors, but there's so much, and my business majors will love this, but there's so much blue ocean out there for the other things. I mean, besides Boise, maybe St. Clair and a couple others, like nobody's really owning the broadcast side. No one's really owning journalism. No one's really owning other content. And those are all options or opportunities, I think, in the space. And I liked that you went after this data. I think it's difficult for me to wrap my head around how do you quantify this besides an interview or what a coach says. Like, how do you differentiate actually? Like, is their mission actually related to skills development, or are they just saying, "Yeah, we developed some skills"? I think that would be my critique towards this question and the data. But I think what it illustrates is really important. So,
Yeah, and you're definitely right. There's always that asterisk with the data. The data presents a picture, but you're right. So, just to be fully transparent with everyone in the chat here, looking at skills development, or, I'm going to even back up. I'm going to look at industry internships and job readiness. So I'll talk about my school for a second, the University of Cincinnati. Our program that is going to be announced this semester will announce with job internship programs with Fortune 500 companies, where you go through this esports program as a vehicle to student enrichment, and you're working directly using skills that you're learning both academically and through the esports program with companies like Procter & Gamble, Fifth Third Bank, Kroger, all these big names. And there are full-time jobs at the end of that program waiting for you outside of esports or potentially in esports, but in the business world that are high-paying jobs, that are prestigious jobs. That is job development in my mind. But it also is joining the Genius League, joining the C9 Academy, or at least for Collegiate, the MSI, the UConnects of the world, and participating in the programs and the pipeline funnels that they already have, and giving your students opportunities to apply for those. So I mean, there's different tiers of how you can do it, but we should just acknowledge that at least people are thinking about it, and they're starting to do it, which I think is the most important part.
For sure. Where did I have a question here? We had one question, Glubinator, for both of you. Thoughts on the new development in a couple schools of an esports department, recreating athletics with new policies and management. So thoughts on creating your own department within the collegiate landscape for esports.
Yeah, so I'm going to get on a little soapbox here, if you'll let me.
Absolutely.
I think that a esports department is an inevitability for schools that are properly invested and have the incentive to be properly invested in esports. However, the asterisk to that is when you're building a new department, and like we looked at with the discrepancy of people who understand facilities and don't understand facilities, the people who don't are way off mark on where they should be. Building a department is a huge deal in an ecosystem, and that comes with the understanding that you are intercommunicative of the politics and the processes and the communications of your campus, administrationally, with faculty, and with students. And a lot of program directors right now operate as these independent islands on campus, largely for a lot of reasons. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. But I would challenge them, like, if you need to talk to your IT person at your campus music or engineering or arts and sciences programs, do you know your contact? Quick quiz. Most probably don't. Having an independent department means you need to know those answers. It's not enough just to say we have our own department, we have our own funding coming directly from the office of the president or the general fund or an endowment. Being your own department means that there are administrational and executive leadership roles and responsibilities that you have of being ingrained in that ecosystem. When, as a director, you feel that you're ready and you know those things, then yeah, you can do that. But if you don't, then no, you're doing a disservice to your students and to your program, because ultimately you're just going to slow yourself down.
Yeah, that's a great point. I always wondered, like, what are you hoping to accomplish with your own department? Is it the freedom to make decisions? Is it your own budget line that no one can touch? I've just always kind of questioned what the hope is to have your own department, because I think most things that you'd want you can accomplish within a different department or within a already existing department.
Yeah, and the other side of the coin, because there are distinct lines here where student affairs may not really be able to have the athletic integration that athletics may be able to have. For example, license use of marks or media rights agreements. They may not be allowed to obtain revenue just based on pure policy. Likewise, athletics may not be the proper place if you're doing academic integration with various different, College of Engineering, College of Applied Science, Marketing, etc. Those departments are built for specific inputs and outputs, and esports crosses those lines and has the ability to cross those lines frequently, which changes things up.
Yeah.
And so where I would, if people want to go in that direction, which I encourage, I think the other model that one can build is a consortium model in which, I think this is probably underlooked in a lot of collegiate ecosystems and campuses. You can do more with others than you can by yourself. Building a consortium and diluting and delegating your leadership ability and decision-making power to other stakeholders within your campus can encourage positive change. So like, for example, to use my school as one, since I'm speaking of an example, I'll lead by it. We have a consortium in which there is an appointed head of academics, which is appointed by the dean of the engineering program, which was appointed by the provost. And then we also have representation from student life, which oversees student activities, which oversees clubs, which oversees the UC Esports Club, which is separate from a program. These different heads also come to the table when it comes to decision making. I'm never going to I will, but I'm never going to make academic decisions on things such as like summer camps or certificates or anything of that nature. That's academics' job, and they have an appointee for that on the committee that's able to do those things. Likewise, if it comes to transportation, well, I know student life is on the transportation committee. I can bring my questions on transportation to them. I don't have to do that myself. It raises my bandwidth incredibly and lets me focus on things that matter to me. And I encourage other program directors to think like that as well.
Interesting. Do you ever have problems with those appointees not doing anything?
Yeah, I do. And I think anecdotally, we all run into that problem, right? For our extracurricular activities, or say, looking back on club days, if you were in a club, there's always someone on the executive leadership that's not doing as much as person A or B. And that's just kind of how life is, the group project mentality. And for those situations, you have to, pick your battles, but also pick your people really carefully. Even if you're picking someone who may not be the most go-getter type of person, maybe they occupy a key role, which is your key to accomplishing a certain goal that you have for yourself. Like Adam, you said, you got to ask yourself, what are you trying to do? Ask yourself, who can help me accomplish those goals? And if it's someone who is a little lazy and gets to take some credit, but you got to do what you need to do, then so be it. It's politics.
Yeah. I think it's a great idea. I know from my experience at Aquinas, at a smaller school, I would have difficulty getting the buy-in from those other departments when I was seen as just another athletic team in the athletic department. I think it was possible. I think the academic side, if they're getting involved or being asked to be involved, I think they usually get excited about that. But that's not to say there would be some challenges, especially when we look at the Midwest schools who are starting these programs. Most of them are struggling with enrollment, budgeting, and then COVID on top of it. Most administrators are pretty hands full with everything else, and esports is kind of the low totem pole spot of that list oftentimes. So the priorities stem from outcomes, input and outputs, and the input is money and dollars and attention and time, and the output is increased revenues, student enrollment, or the increase of grant funded opportunities. And so as long as the value proposition is properly shown, like if you make the case for, I want to host summer camps in our esports lab,
over the summer with class sizes of X at a price of Y, because it'll create X dollars of revenue, and we can rev share between departments on this if you help lead the marketing effort, because your department already has direct outreach to every high school within a 100-mile radius. That makes sense. And you show the value proposition, you'll get the attention. Sometimes you have to think about, what are the other people trying to get out of things too, to make sure that you're framing things in the way that they care about, because not everyone's going to care about you. They're going to care about them. And so one of our jobs is to make sure that, we're framing the value proposition of esports in the right way to the right people.
Absolutely. Every administrator I've talked to, I'm talking kind of generally for the small Midwest schools for the most part, but any small school that's really struggling with enrollment, most administrators have that on the top of their minds. It's enrollment, it's budget, it's COVID. However, you can bring value to accomplish the goals of those administrators, and using esports as that driver, the conversation is going to be a lot more positive than, can I get $50,000 for new PCs? And I would go further and just say, like, if you don't know how much additional revenue you bring into the school just from a recruiting standpoint, minus all the expenses of the program and scholarships, like, that's where you need to start, like, yesterday. Like, have a spreadsheet of, this is how much money I brought into the school this year, minus all the expenses, and have that in your mind. I know for me, I was bringing in $500,000 of additional tuition revenue after all expenses to Aquinas every year. So I knew the value my program was bringing at that current time. And that can start conversations as well. But it depends on who you're talking to, who you're asking, and what drives them. There are plenty of administrators who don't like numbers and money. They want feel good, student involvement, student opportunities, etc. And that's where you can shift the messaging somewhere else towards that. But you're right.
Where do you want to go next, brother? I think there's so many ways and so many directions we can talk about this.
I mean, we always
got. If you want me to, I can monologue if you want.
No, I don't. I didn't pay to get a lecture from Chris. But we always have to talk about salaries. Salaries is the big thing that we always want to talk about, so we have to talk about it. What did you find with collegiate coaches and director salaries? What surprised you? What trend from 2020 to 2021 has you excited or has you not excited?
Oh man, you're always starting with the great questions, my friend. Let's start with the conversation of full-time versus part-time.
Okay.
So first of all, it needs to be understood that not every program director is a full-time employed program director. We learned that this year. We've known that anecdotally from past years. The reality is that something like, I'm offhand right here because I don't have the data in front of me, but it's in the report. I think it's like 16 or 18% of program directors are either part-time or they're stipended, meaning that they have another role on campus.
Okay.
And they're stipended, or they're not even full-time employees, and they are actually part-time doing something on a lower level. And that can range between Division I schools and Division IV or NJC type of schools, 2-year schools. There's a lot of different categorizations there, and we can start talking about that, or we can start talking about pay scale. Where do you want to start? And we can probably open the financial data actually.
Yeah. I've got page 119.
Let's go to page 119, brother.
Does that work?
That's your budget, so you want to go to 120 salaries.
Got it.
Yeah, let's start talking about salaries. So, off the top, what we found is that the average salary range, unadjusted for cost of living, so unadjusted for where you live, looking at you, California, is between $40,000 and $45,000, which is an increase of $5,000 from last year's average, which was $35,000 to $40,000. So the average between those two is actually 42.5, which is what we used. We also noted that the number of directors that are making more than six figures or close to six figures has increased by a lot compared to last year.
Okay.
And this is also could be attributed to a larger sample size than last year, as well as just the growth of the industry as age improves. So there's a slight skewing there. So we do want to keep that in mind. The majority of program directors are making $45,000 or less. About a little over 50% are making 45K or less. That's not a great look for program directors, and I think everyone in this chat will agree with me when I say that it is an underpaid job. We do a lot for a little, and it is a thankless job a lot of times, and the pay should be better. And now we're going to talk about why it's not. And so what I'm going to talk about now is the terrible word in academia, which is called standards and comps. Standards are, especially for larger universities, standards are a pay scale in which a certain activity or a certain level within a department or university-wide has a categorized pay ceiling or a pay floor. When I'll use athletics as a perfect example, obviously we know that salaries for basketball coaches and football coaches can be super high. As a UC student, really sad about the Cotton Bowl, but our coach is still probably sitting at a really nice hefty bonus for that one, even though he lost to Bama. At the same time, though, if you look at your tennis coach, hockey coaches, golf coaches, badminton or lacrosse coaches, there are those too. The average compensation is actually very close to what we see with collegiate esports competition. And the reason for that is because of standards, where they fall under the same standard within the pay scale or within the department weight in terms of seniority and where they sit. And so they're going to get that same ceiling. And if the esports program director is getting a higher ceiling, then lacrosse is going to complain. Volleyball is going to raise a fit. Volleyball's been here for 15 years and is still making the same amount of money. That's an example of a standard that holds us back. And that's indirectly one of the reasons why you should really look at where your department is, where your esports program is located. Departmentally, you might see more pay, more compensation, more budget in a different department, because that standard may be different elsewhere within the university ecosystem. Other schools, like for example in Indiana, the IU and the Purdue system run on standards similar to the government salary, the GS score. And it doesn't matter what the heck of a director you are of. If you are a director, you get this dollar. But it doesn't matter if you have a director type role unless you have a master's degree, a PhD, have been employed for 5 years or more, or are doing an initiative that touches X percent of students or interfaces with X types of leaders. You're not getting a director role. You're getting a manager role. And a manager role below a director role has a different GS level or equivalent salary. Obviously, the situation changes with smaller schools or private schools that have a little more flexibility. They may not be tied to state standards. They may not be tied to university standards, looking at the SUNY network in New York, the UC network in California, the IU system in Indiana, the Texas system in Texas. These all have some type of standards within the membership and management of these massive groups. The second is comps, and the comp is comparables, comparables internal and comparables external regional. If a university has no comp internally, then they will often find a regional comp for it within a similar size. And so you may be screwed from the get-go, because if you go to a school that has 2,000 students and they're looking at another school that has 2,000 students, and that school has it posted publicly, because we're all FOIA for a public school, salary of 35,000, you're going to offer 35,000. If they really want you, they may offer a little more. But they're not going to overpay for your job. And that sucks, but it's true.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah,
and
that happened. So, just I mean, for an example, Central Michigan University, pretty big D1 in Central Michigan, obviously. They posted a position for an assistant director of competitive gaming and esports. They went through interviews and offered like 3 different people the salary of like 45K.
mhm.
Nobody wanted it. Said they needed more, and they came back and said we can't do more. This is our max. We can do it. It's the comps and whatever. They ended up pulling the position and reposting it as a senior director of competitive gaming, and now they can go up to 60.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a fascinating thing that I don't think a lot of people realize the back end. They just say we deserve more. Well, there's other things happening in the back end.
And I don't want to be the negative guy, but I'm gonna get my negativity out first so I can focus on the positivity for the majority of the time. But the other reality is that academia as a public industry, public sector, gets paid less than private sector by default. You look at one of the most common call outs in academia is that teachers are underpaid. It's true. Teachers are underpaid until they get full professor, and not every teacher is going to get full professor, and not every full professor is going to get tenure, and not every tenure is going to get administrator. A lot of adjunct professors, which is what many are qualified as and classified as, make 35 or less, make 40 or less, and some of them don't even get benefits until you're full professor at public schools. And obviously those departments have been around way longer than esports. And these are, grant dollar funded and revenue positive, and, all sorts of arguments can be made. They're still getting that. And so it's a long fight. The advantage that we have collectively in an industry, and this is the positive part, is that we are new, we are young, and we possess skills that nobody else has. We have knowledge and information on trends, variables, and new developments, innovative new ways of education that nobody else has. And that knowledge comes at a premium. And so as a new program is being created, one should make sure the value proposition of the program, and this goes back to the mission of the programs, where they're located, all these things, they all tie together. This isn't, separate pieces of data. It all comes back to this central topic of, what are your program doing? Where is it going to live? How much are you going to get paid for it? You're going to get paid more if you're doing more things than if you're just doing competition. If you're getting competition, then, negotiate raise clause, negotiate your bonuses. Tell them that, hey, if I top 8 in the league, then I want this bonus. Or if I win a tournament, I want this bonus. If I take home a trophy, I want this bonus, which are common in athletic contracts. And plot twist, we as directors know, because the administrators don't, but we know that there are 20-something odd leagues that we can join. And the chances of us top 8ing in one of those leagues is quite high. In fact, the majority of programs do top 8 in at least one program every year, which is statistically impossible for any other sport. So we can create our own wins. So even if you can't win in that way, then propose something reasonably until it gets made. And maybe it's not a $5,000 bonus, maybe it's a $500 bonus, or maybe it's not even a bonus on your payroll, but maybe it's an allowance to purchase new equipment from a capital expenditures account. There are things that we can do to improve our situation and our station, beyond just saying, I want a tournament, pay me more, or I recruited X students, pay me more. There are faculty who are bringing in $1 million grants and they're still getting paid the same.
Yeah, that's a good point. Oh man, what do you want to talk about? Let's let you drive the next topic.
Okay, I want to talk about. There's 2 things I want to talk about. I'm first going to talk about scholarships, because I think that's something important in the survey that we haven't talked about yet. Scholarships is something that is a big contentious point for a lot of people. We feel very strongly about scholarships. So I'm just going to kind of walk through a couple of things. 2/3 of programs offer scholarships. 1/3 does not. Let's start there. That's the baseline. That's our foundation. Of the programs that offer scholarships, 50-50, these programs either have limitations on how many the quantity of scholarships that they can offer, and the other 50% has no limitations on the quantity of scholarships that they can offer. It's really important when it comes down to recruiting, right? Then we look at, okay, let's talk about the R word, the full rides. A lot of programs can only offer partial scholarships, and we know this anecdotally to be true. We all complain about it on Twitter. Like, if I had a full rides, I could win this tournament too. About 21 in 5 programs can offer full rides and have no restriction on the number of full rides that they can offer.
That's a large number.
It is a large number.
A lot larger than I would have guessed.
It is a large number, but we also have to keep in mind the sample size does include NJC schools. It does include, some of these newer programs that haven't got off their feet yet, right? These are year 1 programs. These are year 2 programs. These are programs that are less than a year old in some cases. So just because you can offer multiple full rides doesn't mean that you are going to efficiently offer full rides. Right? Just because you have the ability to do so doesn't mean you're going to reach the people that you need to reach. We're going to use the very controversial Brian Hummel as an example. He is able to do what he does well, not just because he has full rides, but because he also has direct access to the talent pool of people that he can offer full rides to, that everyone is trying to reach. He can reach them directly, and he can also offer them a full ride where some of his competitors that are in that niche area that have that direct access cannot. So he has that advantage. As a lot of these schools grow and age and mature, you'll see that advantage diminishing because more schools will be able to bring this to bear, and they'll understand how to bring this to bear. So the initial reaction is like, whoa, is that even true? Yeah, it's true. But, think about how the application reflects on the data. The next stat then goes into which is my favorite one here, is the total number of scholarships distributed in 2021. And that is the next one. 25% gave $10,000 or less. 25% gave $25K to $10K. And I'm going to skip over the middle. And I'm going to highlight 18% of programs gave over $100,000 worth of scholarships. That is insane. Especially considering, once again, esports as a competitive, university-sanctioned, programmatic ecosystem started in 2016, which is 5 years ago. And that was only with Pikeville, Robert Morris, and UCI, and Miami. So within that amount of time, we've gone from pretty much 4 programs to 450 plus, and almost 20% of them are giving out over $100,000 in scholarship. That is insane. And that's a pat in the back for all of us because we've just changed a huge amount of students' lives. And the question is, well, how many students' lives did we change? So good statistic here. This is a truism. I'm not going to put names behind this, though, out of respect for anonymity, because I don't call it any names in the survey at all. The top 4 respondents, the programs from them within the survey distributed an excess of $5 million. So the top 4 programs that I surveyed distributed more than $5 million in scholarship in 2021. And Maestro does make a point here in chat. The number is inflated due to private schools being able to offer discount money, not real money.
Well, isn't that public schools too? Like, the scholarshiping is not just real money. It's all, I call it monopoly money. It's not real until a student has to pay for it. So I don't know if that's a dig towards private schools he's trying to say, but it's true. But I think it's also at the publics, it's just not as large. But yeah.
Well, it's interesting. The public schools actually, the majority of them give less money in scholarship than the private schools.
Correct. But the
Out
average
of
cost of those private schools is probably higher.
Exactly, which is why they give more.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a total number here that we can all share on Twitter and tell our administrators when we're gunning for more. So this right here is an estimate. So that number I gave you is a truism. That is 100% true. It is based in full fact. I could validate it 100 times out of 100 times. This next one here is an estimation, and it's a very hard estimation to make because we have ranges here within our sample. So the way I came up with this next number in this chart, just so everyone is on the same page, is we take the sample size of 95 and ratio that to our ecosystem sample of 450. Then we multiply that by the multiplier of programs that offer scholarships, which is 68%, to get a different number. Then we multiply that by the aggregate average within a range, which is then estimated with a margin of error, of the scholarship that's distributed. We know what the whales are. We know what the top distribution is. We need to figure out what the lower bounds are and what the mid bounds are, which we can based on this data of 25%, 25%, 17, 1.6, and of course 12.5. And then we come up by multiplying all that out. And then we're running a curve here. We're estimating, and this is within, again, a margin of error, so please don't take this one as a truism, but as close to as I humanly can without asking for dollars and cents for every school. We estimated that collectively, nationally, we provided, as an ecosystem, over $19 million of scholarship for the academic year this past year. $19 million.
Yeah.
And we can say that based on the math that I just described and spelled out. And we can say it based on the data that we already have from a pretty substantial sample size of the whole group, as well as the trust and the volunteering of all of you all sharing this data and sharing, what is the most uncomfortable thing to do, which is tell me your numbers. But that's how we get to that. And I think that number, we can actually acknowledge and report it could be as high as 21 million. That we can reasonably suggest. Could it be higher? Yeah, it could be higher. Maybe there's whales that I didn't survey. I'm pretty sure I got most of all of them. But 19 to 21 is still a really fantastic pat on the back for everybody here. And that's a feel-good moment.
A question from GG Cash. Was there any differentiation between esports specific scholarships or rebranded other aid?
No, and for that, because
I don't know how you
we're talking
quantify that at some schools, because I know at Aquinas, like, we could rebrand whatever we wanted to be called esports, an esports grant. It would be difficult for me as a director to differentiate what is an esports scholarship and what is a rebranded as esports. And that part you're going a little deeper. If I were to do that, and if we were to look at it, we would have to break down our sample size into so many different smaller subcategories that all have the same parameters. So we would have to look at private schools that offer only esports aid. We would have to look at private schools that offer esports aid and other academic aid. We'd have to look at private schools that offer esports aid, enrollment aid, and other academic aid. We'd have to look at public schools. We'd have to look at two-year schools. It's insane. And quite frankly, you all are filling out these surveys voluntarily. And I already asked you like 33 freaking questions. I'm not about to ask you 50 more. So maybe in time we'll be able to get to that point. But also, please note that I do not get paid for this work. I do this as a hobby on top of everything else that I do. This is what I do, after 8 p.m. at night. So, well, I know I appreciate it because these numbers are not anywhere else, and this is what drives conversations for the directors on the floor or on the ground, if you will.
And that's kind of why I did it. I left esports. I left collegiate esports for a period of about 2 years. from 2017 to 2019. And when I came back, I followed up with all my old friends, many of whom had either stayed in or had graduated and went on to in industry or had left. And I asked them a bunch of questions and try to catch back up, right? And a lot of the answers were the same. And what I would see when I would go, watch these digital panels, especially in COVID, were the same case studies and the same success metrics being touted, which are, here's an article to the UCI program. And that's nothing against the UCI program. They do great things, but the UCI program opened in 2016 and it's 2019 right now. Yeah, it was 2020. And we're still using that as a benchmark when everything else is so much widely changed. Like, absolutely not. Where's the new data? And nobody had the new data. And so I said, screw it. Okay, I'm gonna do it. And that's how we're here now.
Yeah, for sure. What else you got? What's the next topic you want to talk about?
All right, so I would like to talk about recruitment next.
Okay.
131 is recruitment. And I want to talk about recruitment on two different levels. So nothing that I'm going to say here should come across as a surprise to anybody in this chat, but I just really want to highlight it in light of the conversation on how I view it. Recruitment here, what we see, we looked, there we go, 131. You're on the wrong page. I think you're on the wrong page. Go one page up for that, 130, my apologies. I was wrong, you were right. Yeah, that's my problem. We looked at how people are recruiting, first and foremost. And the majority of people use Twitter and Discord. Surprise, surprise. We all know that. What I also want to do, and I wanted to keep this nonpartisan, I didn't want to endorse any one particular organization over another, and I will say right up front here, I am not. However, what I will admit, because it's clear as day, is that Stay Plugged In, which was the new kid on the block, crushed it. And they crushed it over everybody else that's been around for years. Gio launched in 2019. LFG, I think, was around the same amount of time. Everybody knows who eFuse is, am I right? But this was, to be very clear, this is what respondents, directors identified as using as their recruiting platforms. Are they members of other platforms? Probably. But this is how they aligned use. And so just as I'm saying more than 5% of people, and I'm saying that because more than 5% of us have an eFuse account. I guarantee it. But this is more of saying that of a population of directors and people who are recruiting, only 5% are recruiting from eFuse versus 38% are recruiting from Spin. Why? I would probably say it's because of the ancillary services that Spin provides, both students and to directors. That's number one. Moving past the front line of recruitment, we peel back the front and we see something a little more messy. The reason, number one, why Spin was able to grow and be so successful is because that there's no proprietary nature of recruitment programs right now. Any one student can join any number of recruitment programs. And recruitment pipelines don't have exclusive access to these students. eFuse tried that. I'm just using them as an example here because they're large. eFuse tried that with the I forget the name of it, but the top 100 high school students, right, guys?
Yes.
But what we found out was an issue for this, and this actually was direct feedback from the survey, was that some students that were on pipeline, thank you, both of you guys, were actually already recruited from Stay Plugged In or from other platforms, or just recruited from Twitter Discords or other things. And those students aren't going to update all their other platforms and profiles to say, oh, I'm taken, take me off. So these program directors are reaching out to all these other pipelines trying to get these same people, and it's just a big convoluted mess, right? So it ultimately comes down to the services. That's the first part we peel back. We're like, oh, this is a huge problem, actually. How can a business sustain itself with revenue and monetization if this exists and it works like this, right? So then we talked to Riot, and we had a conversation with Riot, with Blizzard, and with Epic, and we said, like, this is a huge problem. And what would be a great solution is if you had age authentication in your platform and email authentication to a .edu, or in this case, if you're a high school student, in any email, and you could just check like a badge that says LFG, or looking for recruitment, or something that can let you identify that in the client, in the global ecosystem, that, hey, I'm trying to go to school. And Riot was like, no, we don't want to do that. And Blizzard was like, no, we don't want to do that. So that was kind of sucky, because I think that's really the best solution that we can have at the moment. So then the conversation came then, okay, well, what happens with step 2? How do these ecosystems develop? Well, this is a conversation on revenue. And in the report, we haven't actually touched on this, Adam. We only touched on salaries. We didn't touch on budgets, but budgets look just like salaries, guys. Budgets are not high, and budgets are inclusive of a lot of things except for capital management and scholarships and that major procurement, such as facility builds. So the point that I'm trying to get at here is that industry-wide, we're fairly underfunded, and the developers aren't helping, and there's no ecosystematic ability to differentiate or insulate your business model when it comes to recruitment, which is very scary for anybody who's in this business. And what this means basically is either you raise a crap ton of money and outlast your competition with whatever product you have, or no matter how good a product it is, you're going to realize very quickly the revenue dollars may not turn into what you anticipate internally. And what I can absolutely see coming in the next couple of years is some of these names go dark. And you as coaches and directors and all of us are going to lose access to these resources. Because if we're not able to sustain them with our own budgets and no one else is going to do it, aka developers, then the entire conversation recruitment will only get harder.
I think it'd be an interesting follow-up question of how many platforms actually converted to a student to come to your program. Because I think for me, I've used eSpin. I get messages from Stay Plugged In all the time. And there are good conversations, but I don't think I've ever had a player materialize from there.
They've done very good. We saw case studies of they were able to recruit an entire Valorant team to a school all through that one platform. And I'm sure there's other case studies of the other groups too. But just using that since you mentioned it. But the thing that I really want to highlight to people here is this third, and this kind of segues out to a larger conversation about third-party involvement, is that if we as an ecosystem can't afford to support these third parties, then they will go away, and we will lose access to those services, and we will, that lack of investment will ultimately hurt us in the long run. So that is something that we need to think about collectively, and think about intentionally allocating parts of your budgets to these things. Am I saying, allocate your budget to esports consultants? No, not unless you need it. But hopefully reports like this can help you need it less. Although there's definitely a time and place for everything. But on the topic of recruitment, it has immediate implications and immediate short and long-term effects that we all need to be thinking about. And so that's really the monologue that I wanted to make on recruitment that many people may not be thinking about right now.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Coming from a traditional athletic program up at Aquinas, we used NCSA and Be Recruited, and that did not have to come out of my budget. And I found it to be a really good starting point, but every other collegiate coach seemed to be on there talking with the same students. I think the big problem I have with enrollment right now is that everyone is going after the same 10% of students. and the other 90% of our recruitment pools don't know that college esports is a thing and you can get a scholarship. And that's, I think, where my pain point with recruitment is right now, because I think we all know there's enough students to support the space that are gaming. They just don't know about us, and they don't know about the opportunities at the college level as much as I think people might think they do.
And the one thing that we didn't have here on this chart was high school combines, or people who are reaching out directly to high schools. I'm going to use Nate at Akron because I'm an Ohioan. He's a really good job at this. Literally, I've gone to LAN centers and I will see Nate walk on in there, be like, "Oh, hi, Chris. Oh, hi, Nate." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm just talking to high school students." He'll give his spiel in front of like 20 high school students and their parents. We didn't count that because those are not recruitment pipelines. Yep. Those are active things that a program does individually. In order to build value and differentiate themselves, and it's not something that is quite as universal as Twitter or Discord or things like that. So just clarifying that that's not on this chart for that reason, because it's a different thing.
Lindsay mentioned in chat about marketing spaces to female identifying students, and was the conversation we had, or was it in the report that talked about the idea of some additional, or like how you could change your current space to be more welcoming to female identifying students? Was that in this report?
No, that is not in this report.
That was just something we were talking about separately.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the industry is trending in this direction of, I myself, as you all can see, we love in this household RGB. We love it very much. Does that say that our esports facilities need to be dimly lit RGB rooms that can serve as a dance floor? No, probably not.
I hope not. That's but
I mean, as you move into especially some of these other scopes of what programs can do, like I'm going to use academic integration as a highlight. If your facility is large enough, you can actually open that space from 9 to 5 for teachers to teach classes in that lab, because it is a high-powered computer lab, often one of the highest powered computer labs on campus. It makes sense to use it in such a way. Can't use it though if you use a game management software to overlay on that, because those are incompatible with academic programs. So do note that. But the trend of going that direction and kind of implies a more communal way to go, more bright lights, more white lights, more open space, maybe a little more industrial look. So keeping in mind that that's a change, but we did find that inclusion of programs that were more inclusive at the get-go in regards to who they hired for student workers, who they recruited for an inaugural class. The culture that they set in year one is the culture that ultimately was most likely to propagate moving forward. It's really hard to U-turn your program to become more inclusive. It's much easier to start out being inclusive. So that's more food for thought as well.
That's a good point. Well, we're wrapping up. We got our last 12 minutes here. What is one more topic that you wanted to touch on that we haven't gotten a chance to?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about what I would call the new model. And this is a little, am I allowed to kind of soapbox myself here on this one? This is less in the report.
I'll allow it.
But I'm going to talk about what I'm trying to build, what I'm trying to look at nowadays in collegiate esports. Being able to preface, and I guess I can use this saying that, I've been in the space for a really long time. What I kind of view as the true value of collegiate esports programs. And what I've come to believe, and you can say I'm right or I'm wrong, is that the value of esports programs is not if you can win or if you can recruit a large class. I think that the ultimate product of an esports program is actually the students. And one thing that we learned from now 2 years of these surveys is that anecdotally, students that participate in esports programs are STEM and they're high performing. In fact, there's actually some really good data that actually came from a guy named James Kozacek, who is a titan in esports, collegiate esports. He came from Florida. He was the first hire at Play Versus. He was one of the founders of High School Esports League, HSL. He was one of the original members of HSEL, CSL. Like, this guy has thumbprints all over this industry. He came up with the first PhD research that found that 68% of students that were members of esports clubs in high school were more like students who were involved in esports clubs in high school were 68% more likely to A, go to college, and B, join a STEM field in college. That was a huge statistic that changed the game in terms of how I thought about things. The second statistic, though, that we've learned from the surveys is that the average GPA is actually pretty good. And the retention rate of programs is also equally pretty good. Last year's was 95, this year's was 93, which is higher than a lot of other medium programs. And so ultimately what we look at here is we see this identified outcome where the esports programs that exist on campus have naturally congregated not the, but one of the most talented pools of STEM students on the campus, which is a great thing. And ultimately, what do we do with that? We make them play video games in the evenings and the afternoons, 7 days a week. And that's great. But I think that isn't how do I say this? It's not everything we can do for them. And so ultimately, what we realize then when we look at these students who graduate and we look at clubs in the past, a lot of the students that graduate from leadership levels in clubs ended up going on to high-paying jobs at prestigious institutions. A lot of them also left their schools and moved to the West. When you look at that with your students, when you talk to your students academically, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to be when you graduate? A lot of them say, I want to work in esports. I want to work for a tech company. I want to work for Microsoft or Google or Tesla or Apple or Intuit, or, what is this cool thing? I want to work in Web3. I want to work in crypto. A lot of us can probably resonate with that, hearing those same stories over and over again. And these students are able to academically back up what they're doing. A little shout out to my little brother who just graduated. He's a Diamond 1 League of Legends player. He just got a job as a engines engineer at General Electric, building engines for GE Aviation. Like, that's the level that we're graduating kids at, and they're doing amazing things. And as program directors, we're not celebrating that. And as program directors, we're not telling the business community about that. Clerky said yesterday or today on Twitter how disappointed he was on the level of decks that program directors send to people asking for help. I would agree with that statement. What I'm saying, and what our model that I've thought up and what I've been trying to pioneer here, is that the value of a collegiate esports program is taking that pool of students and making them available to your local and regional business communities, and using them as a vehicle for economic and business development for your city and for your region and for your university. And how I say that is, these students, we've already identified and established anecdotally and some with data that these students are high performing. They want to change the world. They are extremely intelligent. They're, tech centric, but they are also communicative. Someone who can code and software development and also speak to marketing communications in a large firm is very valuable. And an old-fashioned bank may really need those types of people, but they don't want to work for an old-fashioned bank. They want to work for the companies I just mentioned, like Riot or Blizzard or Epic or blah, blah, blah. As a program director, though, you have the power and the ability to go to the local large businesses or mid-sized businesses, or even the tech startup incubators in your region, and say, I have this community and I have these people and they are available. They're looking for employment. They're going to graduate. And statistically, we know they're going to leave. This is the brain drain problem of the Midwest and the Eastern states. And what I would like to propose to you is a partnership. And the partnership is this. The partnership is you support our program and be a part of our students' lives and be where they want, where they are active. In return, we will give you access to these students. We will let you talk to these students, and we will let you showcase yourself, your culture, and your dreams and what you're doing to these students, so that when they graduate and when they're looking for work, they will think about applying to you first. Or if you have programs that you're directly looking to fill, we will offer them the ability to apply for your jobs to fill the roles that you need first. And that is worth $30,000. That's worth $500,000. That's worth $100,000. That's worth $300,000 in a partnership with a different company, because those companies are paying tens of millions of dollars a year to recruiters and to marketing to help convince the people, the next generation, to work for them. And at the University of Cincinnati, we have a slogan called "Next Lives Here." Innovation is the future. Talent is currency, and place matters. Talent, you can have. Innovation is what drives you forward as business. Talent is how you accomplish innovation, and places where you are matters, to spur all of those things. If you do not have talent, you do not have innovation, and you don't have a place in the business community as a long-term tenant and player. And so the vision is that us as program directors, we don't necessarily have to go and look at sponsorship in the traditional level of MSI, give me a 10% discount on PCs and I'll put your logo on my wall, or go to HyperX and ask for headsets. And they'll do that, and that's fine. But instead of fighting and having 450 programs all talking to the same 12 freaking companies asking for these things, go to your local companies like Fifth Third Bank, Huntington Bank, GE, Kroger, Fifth Third, 51 design firms, all these different companies, and say, are you looking for talent? And they're going to say, of course I'm looking for talent. And say, great, I've got great talent. I sound like Donald Trump for a second here. I apologize. I've got the best talent. But in reality, that's what you have. And if you leverage that, you can create dynamic and authentic and meaningful partnerships that accomplish the mission statement of your university, your program, and also impacting your students' lives for the better. You will no longer worry about funding. You will no longer worry about revenue. And then you will no longer be beholden to tuition-based revenue justifications for your program, athletics-based dollars for your program, scholarships for your program, because it'll all speak for itself. If you were recruiting and saying, hey, if you work for me and do broadcasting, you can go work for the events team at Procter & Gamble and do production for some of the biggest names and talent in the business world, or you want to work in coding for them, or you want to do marketing or biz dev, or literally anything, you can do that. So I think that's the model. I think ultimately that's the model. That's the future. Everything else is secondary. Competitive, screw it. Everything else, screw it. That's the biggest value. And it's the easiest value. I think that is the play. I think it's a play because it's replicatable, it's scalable. You can do it in Tennessee, you can do it in New York, you can do it in California, you can do it in Montana. It doesn't freaking matter because it's regional. And that model works. And next year when I perfect it, I'll publish it just like the report so you all can learn it. But conceptually, it works.
I like it. I mean, it sounds good, and right now with the lack of talent pool for companies across the country trying to fill jobs, I think it's an opportune time to test it out. I like it. You got me sold. I zoned out because I was like, okay, now I'm thinking, I got to work on my 30-second spiel for our local businesses because I think
I'll give you an example of a real life case where how this worked. Through the university, just reached out to a local business. It's a Japanese-owned company, but it's here local in Cincinnati. They're a beauty products company. So they work on women's beauty. They own, facial cleanser lines and Jergens and things like that. No memes about being sponsored by Jergens because that's weird, but we don't talk about that. But talking esports with them and talent and that conversation, that was literally all we talked about. And this past month, in the end of December, they submitted a capital request all the way from their CEO of the company for $500,000 to invest in esports. They're now going to be working with agencies, they're going to be working with Twitch, they're going to be working with us. We've got 3 full-time jobs that all pay over $68,000 a year that they want to hire diverse and equitably through the program specifically. They want to hire and contribute money for student workers. They want to sponsor events that we're doing locally in the region. And by the way, did I mention it's a diverse company because it works with women? That was one conversation. I have yet to have a conversation with a major company that is not interested in those types of conversations. In my work, I've worked, hundreds of events and done many different things. And when you throw out a deck, I'm happy if I get a 7% response rate if I'm cold calling it out. With this, I'm close to 100% with this model. And that's not a coincidence. It works.
My deck at Aquinas got me a $1,000 mouse pad sponsorship. It did not give me a $500,000. So, and yeah, I love it. I love the idea. I know for us, like Publix is headquartered right in Lakeland.
Do it.
And I think that'd be a great partnership. I need to work on that pitch, though, that conversation, and get some real data. Did you ever survey your students about or trying to get some information from them on what they're interested in, GPAs? Like, what type of data about your students could you have or did you use?
So we just really looked at STEM affiliation. Honestly, that was the baseline. Because the key thing here is not pigeonholing with this. The model is that you can talk to literally anyone. I could talk to a logistics company if I wanted to. We're not looking for one particular type of employment. Our students are not looking for one particular type of employment. Anecdotally here, the president of the student club here at UC, she's an art student. The vice president, she's a business student. The secretary, she's an engineer. And I'm really happy that I can use she as a pronoun for all 3 of those people. But they're all looking for different things. And so you don't pigeonhole yourself. But the other great part is that when I mention big companies, you could work at Publix. I'll use Kroger as an example. You could work in real estate for Kroger for 30 years and never have to worry about where your green beans are coming from. There are so many cool things you can do in these big companies. The world is vast and wide.
We're playing video games at a university. So
exactly, right?
I never knew I could do that growing up.
So you just don't worry about those types of things. Your job as a director is to build the connectivity points, and then the student's job is to act on it. And if you did your job right as a director, you've created authentic connectivity points that people will naturally gravitate towards, as opposed to you trying to shove them down people's throats. And if you did your job right, then it multiplies. And if you miss one, you miss one. So what? Keep trying.
Well, when you come up with that report or want to share more, let's have you back on, because I have a lot of questions about what this actually looks like practically for a director. But I'm all about it. I'm interested. I'm on the edge of my seat, but it's past 6:30 Eastern, so we got to wrap it up.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Before we go, where can people find you?
Find me on Twitter, please. My profile is WBB Chris, capital BB Chris. I'll just drop it in chat.
Should you tell us what WBB stands for?
Only if chat asks me that question.
Okay. Give it 2 seconds.
We'll see.
Hey, Chew, what's up? Oh, tell us. They're asking.
I was really hoping someone would say no one cares. I lost a bet in college, and I had to change my name to what the club pulled on our Facebook group. And so White Boy Booty won with all the votes. And so my gamer tag is White Boy Booty.
It's cute.
I love that name, but most importantly, I was able to give a speech at the Riot Games HQ to Brandon Beck and Mark Merrill wearing a White Boy Booty t-shirt that they made for me. And they didn't know they made it for me because that was my summoner name.
Nice.
And so that was probably my crowning achievement. Everything past that has just been downhill. That was my high school, and that's where I peaked.
it's so off brand for you. I think that's like
I don't
the
think it
funniest
is.
part. Really?
I don't think it is.
Okay. All right. Well,
You saying I don't have a good butt? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not. I don't objectify people. So I'm not answering that
Wow.
question.
Dang.
How
that
dare you
sucks.
try to
I might as well change mine to
trap me?
flat boy booty. That's rude. That's rude.
Whatever. Well, I want to thank you again for coming on, and I really, truly, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank you for doing this report, because I know you do it. Lindsay gives up nights, you give up nights for this report, all the interviews you do, but it really does push the space forward, and I really appreciate that. And if anyone else, please follow Chris on Twitter. I'm sure if you have any questions or want to talk about it, he'd be more than willing to. He loves to talk about this stuff. It's exciting. Numbers are fun. So without further ado, I think that's going to be it for today, this stream. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. You guys are all awesome. Thanks again for Chris tuning in. And I hope you guys all have a great semester. Good luck. Have fun. I don't know. Is that cheesy? Yeah, that's cheesy.
No, stay safe, guys. COVID's out there, man. Be careful. Get your boosters. Get your shots. Make sure your players are wearing their masks. Because this stuff is. We hit 1 million cases today.
We just got new COVID restrictions on campus again. So here we go.
Yeah, be careful, guys. Be careful and stay safe. I want to talk to all of you next year, not just tomorrow.
Facts. All right. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody. Talk soon.
All right. Have a good night, guys.